So today I'm going to be changing the clutch on this, my 1981 Volvo 345. The reason I'm having to change the clutch is that when I drove it home from picking it up, it was extremely juddery, and I've had a look underneath the car, and I think that the rear crankshaft seal is leaking onto the flywheel and then obviously the clutch. So as you can see, I've jacked the car up or put it onto ramps, and I've also got, because I'm extremely nervous about these things, I've got axle stands just under there just in case something happens, and I've also got some chocks there behind the back wheels. So you can see under here quite how oily the back of the engine is, and if I slide this way you should just about be able to see that where the clutch housing, the bell housing, the bottom of it, that's also very oily. So that's why I think that the juddering has been caused by the oil on the clutch plate. It's particularly in first gear when pulling off, it's really quite severe and makes the car quite undrivable. So I thought I would tackle this job. And my guide for this job is the Haynes manual for the Volvo 340. So the first job, as it said, is to put the car up and then disconnect the negative of the battery, which I have done, and then the first mechanical job is to remove the top two bolts of the clutch housing, and that's more easily accessible from this side. So those two bolts there, and they take a 17mm spanner, so I'm slowly undoing those now. Because of fairly poor access, you can't actually get a socket on that, so what I've done is I've just cracked it off with a spanner a few turns and then just taken them off by hand the rest of the way. These are the two bolts that I've withdrawn, and you can see this one particularly is soaking wet with oil, so I think it does confirm my suspicion that there is oil inside the clutch system. So all the starter motor bolts are 13mm, and I'm just taking the electrical connectors off, and I've taken a photo to remind myself where the electrical connectors all fit afterwards when I put it all back together. And what I'm going to do is, when disconnect those and then just screw the little nuts back on, just so that I don't lose these nuts. And after withdrawing all three of the bolts that attach the back of the starter motor to the engine, I go through these holes here, then it just, after a little bit of wiggling, it pops out, and you're left with a nice little view of the flywheel. Next job is to remove the clutch cable, and to do that I needed to crack off this little lock nut, which I've done using two 10mm spanners, just cracking them off in the opposite direction. So I just need to withdraw the lock nut and then withdraw the main adjusting nut and the this little nylon washer, which is slightly perished on my car, but I'm sure it'll be fine. So I'll just do that now. Right, so I've now removed the clutch cable entirely from the clutch assembly, and then I've just put the little nuts and washer back on it. The next job is to remove, there's a metal plate that's in front of the flywheel. It's just a thin metal plate. I can just about see it there, and there are, I think, 4 bolts, and they're 13mm ones that hold on to it. 2 either side at the top and 2 either side at the bottom just there. I've undone that one already. I've skipped ahead a little bit, and the next job was to remove the prop shaft, and to do that I had to loosen that little Allen bolt. There's one on each end of the prop shaft, and then the prop shaft then slides forwards and backwards quite loosely. The next job, to actually remove it and detach it, is to go to the back of the car to the front transmission mounting, which I'm afraid you can't quite see here, but there it is. There's a bolt on each side, and if you loosen that, almost all the way, loosen the nut almost all the way. That drops the front of the transmission down a little bit, which gives you enough leverage to then be able to slide the prop shaft forwards out of the, so backwards out of the clutch input shaft towards the back of the car, and then forwards out of the gearbox, and then it's loose like it is here. It's completely detached from the car. Right, you join me, I'm afraid, quite a bit of time later. There's the car. I got into some difficulty with the rounded off bolt that was holding the engine mount in place. So I stopped, lost patience, and got a bit cross with the whole thing. But anyway, I managed to get a kit to withdraw rounded off bolts, and undid that quite happily. I've also withdrawn the entire exhaust system. I have withdrawn the entire prop shaft, which is sitting in the boot, and then I have taken off the last remaining couple of bolts holding the bell housing in place and removed the bell housing, so that's now on the floor. The inside of the bell housing was caked in oil. You can just about see the back of it. I've been cleaning it like mad with some engine degreaser to see if that will improve. This is the plate that kind of protects the flywheel, and that was also completely covered in oil. The next job I had to do was remove the flywheel. There it is there. That was actually really difficult until I saw a trick on a YouTube video. So the difficulty was that every time you tried to undo one of the flywheel bolts, then obviously it turned the engine whilst doing so. You needed something to lock against the engine. The Haynes manual suggests that you use a screwdriver, jam it into the teeth, but I just couldn't see how that would work. It kept slipping, and anyway. But in the end, I saw a YouTube video which suggested that you hook the circular end of a spanner onto a clutch bolt, which you bolt to the flywheel itself, like that, just that one there, and then put back in a gearbox, bell housing bolt, which maybe you can see, that big long one there. I screwed that one back into the engine block, and then I wedged the spanner between the two of them. I'll show you a bit later on when I put it back together again how to do that. So I've taken these 7 bolts off the flywheel. They're 17mm, and the flywheel has come off. It's a great big heavy lump of iron. Then I have prized out the rear main seal of the engine, and that is here. I'm not going to touch it because I've just got new gloves on, but as you can see, it has completely failed. Oil was gushing past it, so I think that definitely is the culprit for the slipping clutch. This is the old clutch, which actually doesn't look that bad, but I'm guessing it must have some oil contamination. So my next job is, there's my nice new seal, so I'm going to put that in place, dip it in a bit of engine oil, and then slot it back in place into the back of the engine. There we go, that's my new rear main seal in place. So my next job is just to do a little bit more cleaning, and then it's a case of starting to put everything back together again. Right, you'll see that I have now fitted the flywheel back onto the back of the engine, and I have tightened by hand, or as much as I can with a hand ratchet, these 7 flywheel bolts. And so this is my little trick for keeping the flywheel stationary whilst you're trying to torque it down, and that's to screw in one of the clutch bolts into the flywheel, and then one of the gearbox, the bell housing bolts into the block, and using a spanner in the way, again acting against tightening, you just jam it into place, and then that will clip onto there in just a moment, not when I torque it down. So I shall get it torqued down now. Right, so you joined me a few days later. I torqued the flywheel bolts down. I then fitted the clutch onto the flywheel with the clutch pressure plate. I used a socket to jam it in the middle, and that worked just fine. I didn't need a specific tool. And then I just carried on putting everything back together again, which was much more straightforward than taking it all apart, especially since I'd already done it once and knew what to do. So that's done. So as you can see, it's running and it's not on ramps, which means that I did it. It all went back together again, it started, and it rolled off the ramps. I was so pleased lifting my left leg up on the clutch pedal and feeling it bite and thinking, oh, it's actually going to move, and it moved, and I did that. So yeah, I'm really pleased I did it. I've been driving the car for a few days around Cambridge, and it drives brilliantly. The new clutch has completely transformed the car. It means that it doesn't judder at first gear. It's really confident at take up. The gear change is really nice. So yeah, completed that project on the car. Lots of other bits and pieces to do, but clutch and rear main seal done. Hooray!